Everyone. I am Vibhuti Chaudhary, working as an assistant professor at the College of Agriculture in Parole University. So I welcome you all, first of all. So let's start about our today's webinar. So today we are going to start a very informative, very productive and informative insight into plant disease management webinar. So the first question here what is plant disease? So as we all know that the plant disease is any departure form of plant healthy state which expressed with a marked symptom and disorder on shoots, leaves, fruits, stems or roots of the plant. So a plant is considered in a healthy when it is normal in a growth and produce a good yield, but it is considered diseased when if it shows the abnormality in any part of whole plant part, right? So this informative webinar provides some insight into the etiology of plant disease and their management and their principles of disease management in a different way. So for today's webinar, our chairman is our Dean and Principal Sir, Dr. Chandrakant Sharma Sir. And also we have a Dr. Ida Wilson Man, okay, as the speaker. She is a plant pathologist, consultant, science writer from Western Cape, South Africa. Okay, so now I would like to introduce her in a brief. She has completed in PhD in plant pathology, and at present she is worked as a science lead, organic products, biorevolution, and PAL, South Africa. So in the past, she worked in a different organization on different positions like crop health consultant, a specialist in a crop health consultant, and many more. She has also received more than 15 numbers of national and international awards for research on crops. And also she has been invited in a workshop conference in a different countries like China, Japan, okay, Turkey, okay, Russia, okay, and also we invite her in India for a webinar also. Right? Now I would like to invite Dr. Chandrakant Sharma sir. Please share your valuable words to our audience. Dr. Chandrakant Sharma sir.
Thank you, Vibhuti. In the present era, if you see, diseases are the crucial, whether these are in the plants, and we can visualize the condition of the corona which is happening in the human being also. So it is always the significant part of any study which is related with the science regarding to study the disease, the etiology of the disease, and how it can be managed, whether it's the plant or the animal or the human being. Before discussing about today's topic, I just want to explain something about our esteemed Parole University. Sorry. Our esteemed Powdery University is leading and one of the best in India in the domain of the education, under the dynamic leadership of Honorable President Dr. Devanshu Patel sir. In the Faculty of Agriculture Sciences, we are offering the degree in the agriculture, dairy technology, agriculture engineering, and recently we have introduced the diploma in animal husbandry. And I am sure we are catering the need of the society by imparting the knowledge. As per the today's topic, it is very much essential to manage the plant disease. And the today's speaker, Dr. Ida Wilson, is having the highest exposure in this field. And I am sure today she will discuss a lot about the things which are required to manage the plant diseases. With these words, I would like to welcome Dr. Ida Wilson. Over to Vibhuti.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So now, without taking much time, I welcome Dr. Ida Wilson, ma'am. Please start your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I have not had the opportunity to visit India yet, and I am very excited to share this insight on plant disease management with the group that we're talking to today. As mentioned, plant diseases are important because they cause crop losses of up to 100%. And especially in our rural areas in India, where a lot of wheat is cultivated, this can be one of the biggest problems that is presented. So the talk today will be divided into 3 parts. Firstly, I'll have a quick view at why do we encounter so many problems with plant diseases. Then I will share with you some of the concepts in plant disease management. What is it that we need to look at? What is it that we need to think about when we want to manage plant diseases? And finally, I'll give you an overview of some of the important wheat diseases, which is the fungal blotch diseases of wheat, powdery mildew of wheat, and then also bacterial leaf streak. And we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers. So here is a pressing question. Why do we see so many burning issues in crop protection? When I speak about crop protection, this is how we protect our crops against pests and diseases. And you might have noticed in the recent past that problems are becoming more and more. So there's one important thing that we need to take into consideration, and this is climate change. So for many years, the carbon dioxide atmospheric levels have been under a certain threshold. But as you can see on this slide, from 1950 to currently, there's been a huge increase in these carbon dioxide emissions. So the greenhouse gases are rising, and along with this, the land surface and the air temperature is also rising. So if you look at this graph from 1850 up until 1980, you can see the anomaly. This blue line over the PowerPoint slide actually shows you how much was temperatures higher or lower than the annual averages. And you see for many years, from 1850 until 1980, it didn't vary very much. And then around 1990, there's a very sharp increase in temperatures, and you can clearly see the temperatures rising there. So these rises in temperatures has big impact on weather and climate. And this graph shows you the billion-dollar disasters and how in the USA and how they have increased since 1980. So less than $5 billion disasters in 1980, up to more than 15 in 2017, and this number is rising. So, and this is because climate is changed. So this is another depiction of these impacts, and you will see that it is drought, flood, freezes, severe weather, hail, tornadoes, wildfires, and hurricanes. And if we can see these macro impacts in the world that surround us and how it is impacting humans, the question is, what is the micro impacts? Because climate is the driver of the occurrence of all living organisms on the planet. So as climate changes, the geographical areas where organisms live and their relative abundance shifts. So our current climate is not the same as it was in the past. And this is why we see so many unpredictable changes. This long session period of time from 1850 up until 1980 had a very predictable climate. So if you think about farming and the history of farming, often the old farmers would be able to tell the younger farmers exactly how to manage their pests and diseases. But now, in modern times, from 1990 onwards, because climate is unpredictable, the pests and pathogen populations, pests and the diseases of plants have become unpredictable. So it cannot be business as usual. So at first, we had this long era of historic climate, which was always the same. So the grandfathers, their sons, and their sons could farm in the same way because they knew what to expect. But climate is now changed. So historic knowledge used to be enough, but now knowledge is lacking. Our old solutions used to be reliable, but now the old solutions are not always reliable. In the olden days, a slow response could be good enough, but now we have to give swift action. And in the olden times, we used that old recipe of our ancestors, and we knew how to deal with situations. But now the diseases that we are dealing with needs a new approach. So if I speak of diseases in plants, let's have a look at exactly what are the concepts that surround plant diseases and plant disease management. So the first question that I will answer for you is, what is the cause of plant diseases? Where do they come from? So there are two places where plant diseases originate from. And the first is abiotic, which means non-living. And the second is biotic, which means living. So abiotic causes is the climate extremes like drought. We all know that you cannot have a good crop when there's drought. Nutritional imbalances, damage due to agrochemicals, genetic traits. Biotic brings us to living organisms, which is transmittable, it's infectious, and it can move from one place to another and infect the crop. There are three important groups that causes disease. It's viruses, bacteria, and fungi. This is an example of a virus that causes disease in plants, the tobacco mosaic virus. This is an example of a bacterium, Xanthomonas translucens, which causes diseases in plants. And this is an example of a fungus, Plumeria graminis, also known as powdery mildew. So just those three examples of a virus, a bacteria, and a fungus. Now, where do they come from? Where do the plant diseases come from? Sorry, where do the plant diseases come from? So there are two places where plant diseases survives. It's in-season survival or out-of-season survival. When I speak of in-season, that is when the crop is on the land or in the field, and the out-of-season survival is when the crop is not present and where the diseases survive in that time. So in-season survival is when the mainly fungi as causal organisms of disease survive on plants. And this is an example of different kinds of rust fungi on wheat and how they appear on the wheat. There's also on the left-hand top side powdery mildew and then some diseases of barley, the bottom right-hand side. So basically the organism will survive on living material and then proliferate from being on the living material. The other place where plant diseases come from is out-of-season survival, where they survive as living organisms on plants, but these are alternative hosts. For wheat and many of the grass-like crops, alternative survival might be on weeds, grassy weeds. They also survive in structures called fruiting bodies, and they can survive on various other substrates. So this is an example of wheat stubble as a place where fungi survive. And they survive in the format of fruiting bodies. Here specifically, if you look at that little black dot on the wheat stubble, that is a fruiting body, an asexual fruiting body, where the fungus survives. They can also survive on seed, in soil, and in grasses. And then we have to ask, but how are they dispersed? So the dissemination of bacteria specifically, because they don't have any mechanism to propel themselves, mainly relies on water. And this is a short video where you can actually see a drop of water that's falling on a tomato, and then it rolls over the surface of the tomato. And as it rolls over, it actually picks up all the bacteria that is on that tomato, and then it falls on the leaf, and you will see that droplet with the bacterial cells entering this tomato, the leaf openings. And then it comes into the inside space of the leaf, and it starts attaching to the interior structures of the plant cells and plant cell walls. And from there, it will release toxins into the plant. So that's a very, very clear depiction of how bacterial diseases infect plants. And then if we look at fungal diseases, many of them are disseminated by wind. This is powdery mildew of wheat. And here is an example of how this fungus spreads and infects plants. The fungus has a chain of spores. These are the infective units. They are like seeds. When they fall on new leaf tissue, they will infect the leaf tissue and cause new symptoms. Here is a nice depiction. These spores aren't actually that big, they're microscopic, but it gives you an idea of the presence of the fungus in your wheat fields. Okay, then we also get the dissemination of diseases by water. In this example, I will tell you more about Sectorial triticale. It causes Sectorial leaf blotch in wheat. So this is what the symptom of Sectorial leaf blotch looks like on a wheat leaf. And the survival of the fungus is in these little black fruiting bodies, which I explained to you a bit earlier in the stubble. And this is what they look like if you look at them from closer by. So this depiction shows us that when water falls onto that fruiting body, the inside structures swell. So it's a turgor, it's a water-related pressure, and that pressure causes the fungal spores to shoot out from that fruiting body. Once again, these spores are microscopic. You can't see them with your eyes, but this depiction actually shows you very clearly how the fungal structures are disseminated through the fields. Then the next question is, how do plant diseases infect? So the infection takes place at different plant parts, and then also because it's different parts of the plant over a timeline. So if you look again at wheat as an example, you'll have seed infections. You can have seed infections at the very beginning of the season, followed by early foliar infections, late foliar infections. Once the head emerges, head infections, and also stem infections. So different parts of the plant over different phenological stages of the plant. Then there are two ways in which infection takes place. Monocyclic is a single point of infection. It's only one point where the plant becomes infected. You have it's often a seed-borne disease, root-borne, soil-borne disease. Just at one point, the plant is challenged with that disease, and it won't be infected with that problem again. So here is where we use seed dressings, for instance. We cover the seed in a fungicidal dressing to protect it from fungal diseases. So this is a seed-borne disease, which is an example of monocyclic diseases. This is, I can't do it's smut. It's smut, loose smut of wheat. And then if we look at a polycyclic infection, polycyclic is the word more than one cycle of infection, is where there's initial infection of the disease, but then once the lower parts of the plant are infected, the fungus proliferates again. It also happens with bacterial diseases, and they keep on infecting the wheat plant over and over again up until, so what happens is you get infection within a single plant, and then you get infection between neighboring plants. This is Sectorial leaf blotch of wheat, and it's a perfect example of this polycyclic infection where infection started out at the bottom of the plant, and then it kept on going up, 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 and you see it here in the flag leaves of wheat. So what loss may occur due to plant diseases? And this is a depiction of a wheat plant which was infected with stem rust. Stem rust is a very important disease of wheat in India. And you can see the higher the percentage infection in the plant, the higher the damage to the wheat kernels, up to 80% loss in yield. So small infections, a lower percentage, and the more the plant is diseased, the less the yield is. This is also shown here, the impact of diseases. So when your plant is resistant, so this stands for resistant, resistant, moderately resistant. Okay, so this is just basically a scale of how sick the plant will get when it's challenged. So on this side, plants don't get sick, and on this side, plants get very sick. And you can see the sicker the plant gets, the more the symptoms are, the greater the yield loss, and absolutely up to 70, even 100% yield loss. So it is a very important topic that we are speaking about today. Then also the green area of leaves photosynthesize. Photosynthesis is the transition or the capacity of plants to create or to produce sugars from sunlight energy. And you can see here, once these fungal pathogens start growing on the leaf, they reduce the green leaf area. And this is just another graph clearly showing that how the bigger the diseased area, the lower the yield. So this specific graph is on bacterial leaf streak of wheat, which is also a growing problem of wheat cultivation around the world. Not only do you lose the yield, but there's also a lower hectoliter mass, protein mass, grain can be shriveled, and then sick seed will show poor germination. So that's more than just yield that is lost when you have problems with diseases. This shows what nice healthy seeds look like compared to diseased ones. And here you can see the difference between a healthier ear or head and a diseased one. So now we come to the important question: how do I manage plant diseases? What can we do when we go out into the agricultural arena? What can we tell farmers? And how can we go about managing plant diseases? So there are two important ways that we go about managing diseases. We can prevent them, and prevention of plant diseases, and this is a very important point which I would like to stress, is that when we manage plant diseases, it's not only about control. It's the same for humans. We have to manage our own health by doing things which are healthy for our system. And it's the same for plants. We can prevent them from being ill by looking after the soil, keeping the soil healthy. The choice of variety, specific in India, historically, wheat varieties with resistance to stem rust brought a big revolution in the amount of food that can be produced. And as new resistant varieties, that's plants which can withstand disease, become available, farmers should plant them. We have to look at the quality and the health of our seed. When you plant healthy seed, you will have healthier plants. The source of your seed mustn't come from previously diseased areas. Then we have to apply seed treatment to protect the seed. Seedling density is important. Seeds mustn't be planted too closely to each other because then they compete. The fertilizer regime, over-fertilization also encourages disease development. And then the management of weeds which compete with plants in the field. Then if we look at control, how can we go about controlling diseases? The first point is scouting. That's really important. You have to be aware of if there are any troubles in the fields or the orchards. The second thing is correct identification. For instance, if you have a bacterial disease on wheat, you can't spray a fungicide to control that disease. So it's important to know what the source of the problem is. It's important to use registered products for the control of diseases, apply your products timely at the correct dosages, and also rotate the mode of action. So products work in different ways. If you use the product that works in a specific way over and over again, then the diseases, the fungi become resistant against that product. So we mustn't use the same mode of action over and over. Then here's an important question. Why do fungicides sometimes fail? And as I mentioned now earlier about the bacterial disease that cannot be treated with fungicide, it's important that we have the correct identification of the problem. Products must be registered. Timely application is absolutely crucial. Correct dosages is very important, and we have to rotate the mode of action, because if we use the same thing over and over, eventually the pests and diseases might overcome the way that that product works. So now we're going to have a quick look at, I've explained to you why we're seeing more and more diseases, why they're becoming troublesome, and where they come from, and how we can manage them. And now I'm going to show you some photographs of 3 of the important diseases of wheat: fungal leaf blotch diseases, powdery mildew, and bacterial leaf streak. So leaf blotch diseases is globally very economic, important diseases. The water is important for dissemination, as you saw that one video. Symptoms are varied and not always easy to distinguish visually from other fungal infections. And we know that there is fungicide resistance if you want to protect your plants against these. So this is a monocyclic infection. And you see these asexual fruiting bodies, the little black dots here that looks like pepper. That's the survival structures of the fungus. This little yellow halo there is where initial infections take place. It's the first response of the plant. And then later on, the plant material will senesce, it will die, and then the spores are, and survival structures are formed inside there. So this is just a close-up of the survival structures. And this is the way in which one can remember when you are dealing with Mycosarella graminicola leaf blotch, Sectorial leaf blotch, is that the fungus grows in straight lines along the vein of the leaf. If you look at a different kind of leaf blotch caused by Parastachnospora nodorum, these blotches are forms irregular shapes. That's the first thing, and they also don't have the black pepper dots on the inside, and that's how they differ from Sectorial TTC blotch or Mycosarella TTC blotch. Also, a Parastachnospora nodorum or nodorium leaf blotch can also go into the heads or ears and cause bloom blotch. The seeds that are infected with this disease will carry that disease into the following season. So it's important not to plant seeds that are infected with bloom blotch. Then lastly, of the 3 blotch diseases is tan spot. And here you can see it's almost like a eye-shaped lesion that appears with a little black dot on the inside. Then what you do to control it, it's important to apply seed treatment, fungicidal seed treatment, and in-season fungicide application is also used to protect plants. I don't know about these leaf blotch diseases in India, but in Europe, it's one of the major diseases. And in South Africa, we've also been having recent problems with that disease. Then powdery mildew is globally important. It's a very economically important disease. It can infect in the early stages of plant development. Wind is important for dissemination. That's that little video where you saw the chain of spores and then how they are disseminated by wind. And it's difficult to control if intervention is too late. Also with known fungicide resistance. A polycyclic infection of spores that survive in the stubble. Also, the early infection of plants show firstly a little yellow discoloration of everywhere where the spores have landed and are starting to germinate. And then later on, you get this white fluffy growth of the fungus on the leaves. Powdery mildew is caused by a rispi, Plumeria graminis forma specialis TTC. It's not so important to know all these long names. It's more important just to see what kind of damage these fungi are doing to the plants and how it can actually impact agricultural production. Similar to the leaf blotches, this fungus also generates these asexual fruiting bodies from where it survives and infects in the next season. So these little brown or peppery spots we see on the plant, they are very hardy and they survive unfavorable environmental conditions. So that's also how these fungi survive to a next season. So we want to control powdery mildew by fungicide application. And in South Africa, at least, it's also one of our bigger problems. Then bacterial leaf streak is caused by Xanthomonas translucens, Papaver undulosa. It is the most important bacterial disease of wheat worldwide. It relies on water for dissemination, similar to the video on tomato. The symptoms may vary. It's not easily to distinguish from other diseases. Most varieties of wheat are susceptible. Susceptible means most wheat plants can get sick from this bacterium if it's present, and it's not seen in the early growth stages of the plant. So this specific bacterium is very difficult when it enters the system to get rid of it. It can survive on seeds for 6 years, can survive on grass hose for 8 years, and it's not difficult to control because we don't have products that we can apply, like the fungicides against the fungi. The bacteria, as you saw with that video, they are restricted to the vascular system of the leaf. They can only move along the structures of the leaf. So you see this very distinct stripy leaf streaks on the wheat leaf. Then also it is disseminated by water, and you can see under very high infection circumstances, there's this little sticky exudate. It's similar to honeydew that some insects exude, and these droplets also support the transmission of the bacterium as it sticks to surfaces that it gets into contact with. So most objects moving through an infected field holds potential to disseminate the bacteria. So as people walk through the field, birds, insects, mite, tools, vehicles, soil particle, and water sources. So there was a massive infection of this disease in Zambia, and you could very clearly see, I visited them about 2 years ago, and you could very clearly see as the irrigation equipment ran through the field, the equipment they ran through the field, with the wheels of those pivots, you could see the disease disseminating better. Just a nice photo of an aphid with some water on it. Okay, so Xanthomonas also causes black chaff. So it's the same bacterium that causes the leaf streaks, can in the chaff cause these black discoloration of the glumes. Similar to the leaves, it follows a stripe-like pattern. And once you see this stripe-like pattern, you will know that that's an indicator of the presence of the bacteria on these glumes. Again, it's in perfect stripes, which follows the vascular structures of the plant. And this is just another example of my own photograph of it here in South Africa. Okay, so bacterial leaf streak control requires quite a lot of preventative action. You have to plant healthy seed, you have to sanitize the seed or seed treatment. Products to treat the seed is not available, so it would be an option once it becomes available. So it's important that if this bacterial disease is suspected, that it must be tested and the outcome supported by scientific results. And then by all means, because this disease is so difficult to control, it's very, very important that diseased seeds must not be planted. You can reduce the inoculum. Inoculum is the amount of bacteria present with potential to cause new disease. You can reduce the inoculum in fields by crop rotation away from the grass-like crops for up to 3 years, so the bacteria doesn't have a host and then it struggles to survive. Tillage or burning of the wheat residue. and by managing grass weeds effectively. During the growing season, it's important to follow phytosanitary measures because this bacteria can stick to shoes and machinery. It's important not to use the same clothes, shoes, machinery, and so on in fields that are diseased in the same fields that are still healthy. And this, in general, is a good practice. Is that when you see diseased plants, not to cross-contaminate healthy areas with your shoes or implements, clothes, and other things. So these are the take-home messages. Plant disease management is becoming more challenging because of climate change. Plant diseases survive in dead and live plant material and is disseminated in many different ways. The infections can be a single point infection, as for seed or roots, or it can happen multiple times, as for foliar diseases. Loss in yield and quality is experienced, with losses becoming greater as disease pressure increases. Up to 100% yield loss can be experienced, so effective disease management is crucial. Control of diseases requires an integrated approach, starting with healthy seed. The application of foliar products is only an intervention, as an early intervention is not enough. So this is one of the things that I've been very strongly promoting in the work that I do, is that we also have to look after the health of our system and not try and protect it only against diseases. There's a holistic approach of which prevention is the first, and then we try to control it if we're not able to prevent the diseases. Thank you very much, and I will be able to take some questions now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It's a very informative session. So now I would like to ask our audience or our students, it's open for your questionnaire. You can ask any queries or any questions regarding plant disease or their management. You all can ask Dr. Ida ma'am.
You can ask me about other crops as well, if you have a specific interest in some other crops, or pests, if there's some interest in pests.
Dr. Wilson, I have a small query. Whenever we think about the diseases, and we always think about the PR proteins, and the PR proteins play the significant role regarding the defense mechanism of any plant.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
whenever we think about the integrated approach, whenever we are planning to manage the disease in the crop or any vegetation occurring away, how it impacts the synthesis and the regulation of the PR proteins, if we talk about that. Any significant role in that case if we are using the IPR approach, sorry, integrated pest management approach or integrated disease management approach.
Mm-hmm. I'm not acquainted specifically with the molecular mechanisms. I am a field biologist, so I work with the plants and the infections of the biological organisms in the field, and then also the mechanisms for protection. So I understand the PR proteins are important, but I think you know more than I do. So if you do have the answer to that question, you can tell us.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now I have another query. Whenever we recommend the integrated disease management to the farmer of any country,
Mm-hmm.
at your practical level, which is best enough, whether the biological approach or the chemical approach or any alternative approach which we recommend as per your
Okay, so
experience, whatever you are having.
from my own experience, I've seen that it is important that we have to look at the risk in any situation. any given situation. So throughout my career, I've come to a place where I like to draw up a risk profile for a specific crop or area, where we look at how prone that crop is to disease or pests. So some crops will be more easily damaged, they will be more susceptible, more likely to show yield loss. And some crops, I'm talking specifically about cultivars, will not be so susceptible to diseases. Then, for instance, we've had trouble with blueberry production, which is in a region where grapes are also produced. So, and then there's a grey mold problem on there. So the question is, what is the regional uh, inoculum pressure look like? What is the health of the soil? What is the climate? So if you look at a high risk profile, this will be a plant which is prone to disease in an area with high regional inoculum. Maybe the soils are not healthy, the climate is very conducive. And when we are in that situation, biological control is often not enough. So this is where chemical intervention will be needed. The risk situation is high, so we need some chemical intervention. When the opposite is true, we have a good soil in an area where the pressure from the specific disease or pest is low. We've got good genetic material, the plants are quite resilient, and the climate is not so conducive to the pest or the disease specifically. Biological control can be sufficient. So that said, there are biological control options that are very, very good and can also maybe in some higher risk situations support the management of a pest or a disease. But I am not, I don't choose one side. I don't think biological intervention on its own is the answer, nor do I think chemical intervention on its own is the answer. I stand for the reduction of chemicals as far as possible, but in some instances, the chemicals as a tool is helpful.
Very true. Whenever we think in a holistic manner about the management of the disease, generally nowadays those who are graduating or those who are having such kind of the inclination to do the the modern farming, they think they can control the diseases or the pest by one way. It is not possible. They have to think in a different way, whether the temperature is suitable for that or not. So that is a good point. So I think in future, whenever we will be lucky enough after having this, the over this COVID pandemic, I will invite you to meet with my students to ignite the students.
Thank you. I lost audio just for a few minutes there, so I'm not 100% sure. What was the last thing said?
Actually, I told we are nowadays facing the COVID pandemic. After that, if we will be able to invite you to meet the young minds, to ignite the young minds in our esteemed Palo University.
Oh, 100%. I would love to come and visit you. But until then, I am available online and anybody can contact me, or if they have interest in the specific field. I love mentoring young people. And I also think you will see in my presentation, I try to keep information simple and concise in a way that it's easier for us to retain the information. So yeah, I love the world. I love people, and I would love to interact with your students more. Thank you for the opportunity.
Very true. Vibhuti.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Ida ma'am. It's a very informative session regarding different plant disease and their control measurement and their management. Okay, some kind of a plant disease like a rust or a powdery mildew. So one question is there, ma'am, that in a cucurbitaceae family, there are so many vegetables like a cucumber or bottle gourd or a bitter gourd. Okay, there is a major problem like a powdery mildew. So how we can control in a powdery mildew in a cucurbitaceous crops in a biological method?
Okay, so you see the powdery mildew disease cycle shows us that the disease is surviving in the crop residue of the previous season. So when you have trouble with powdery mildew, it comes from the soil and from desiccated and senesced plant parts. So this is the first point of intervention. Is the one thing you can do is if you plant a different crop for a period of time which is not susceptible to that specific powdery mildew, you can also help the inoculum pressure to decrease. Then another incredibly important contributor to problems with powdery mildew is nitrogen fertilization. So when fertilization rates are high, it actually benefits the fungus. So there's on the phyloplane, on the leaves, there's a change of the microbiome, which benefits the fungus. So it's important that your fertilization practices do not benefit the occurrence of that specific disease. Then, as you also know, the disease flourishes in humid and warm conditions. So the canopy of the plant growth can be managed in a way. So your planting density, you can make it a bit lower to try and manage the humidity in the canopy. And that will also support the powdery mildew infection. And just in general, that's the sanitation practices. I can't accentuate this enough. If you have a diseased plant in your tunnel, in your greenhouse, in your field, it's important to get rid of that material, because for every plant that stands in once went to a tunnel of tomatoes, and the one row of tomatoes closest to the like the wall of the tunnel, they were so diseased, and that's a closed system. And as long as those diseased tomatoes were standing there, they were actually a source of fungi to infect the rest of the tunnel. So it's a basic measure. It's very simple, but it's important to sanitize the area where you cultivate, and that means get rid of dead and senescent material that looks diseased.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So very informative regarding our plant disease, and with very informative, productive for our students. Okay. So before I'm going for thanks, I would like to invite our respected Dean and Principal Sir, Dr. Chandrakant Sharma Sir, to share the valuable words for today's webinar.
I think we are very much thankful to the audience as well as today's speaker for sparing the time, and I'm very much sure after having this lecture, their thoughts, their way of thinking has been changed for positivity, how to manage the diseases in the plants, and how they can run their venture in the perfect manner by managing the diseases. I think thank you very much to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So now we are going to end of our today's session. Before that, I would like to thank to Dr. Ida Wilson ma'am, who gave a valuable time, okay, for today's webinar, to give the different kind of knowledge regarding plant disease to our students, to our audience. So I would like to thank Dr. Ida Wilson ma'am. Thank you so much. And also, I would like to thank our respected Dean Sir, Dr. Chandrakant Sharma Sir, who always support us for different kind of event and for today's webinar also. And also, I would like to thank our audience and our students. They are giving their time also attend today's webinar and get knowledge a different kind of plant disease and their management. Also, I would like to thank our teaching and non-teaching staff who always give a support in a different kind of event like today's webinar, and also our different faculties. And I would like to thank on the behalf of entire team of our Faculty of Agriculture, College of Agriculture, and the entire team of PU Webinar and Parallel University. So thank you so much, Al. Thank you.
From my side, I just want to say thank you for a very well organized webinar. Thank you for the technical team who was sitting behind the scenes and made this such an easy way to communicate with everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Ida Wilson on LinkedIn. Or you can send me an email at ida@biorevolution.co.za. I will try to answer questions. If I take a bit long, it's just because I'm busy, but I'm always happy to help.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.